what we'll do here for the next 30 minutes, everyone, was we'll have a Q&A with Gilbert. We'll discuss in detail a little bit about what he's working on and why, and then dig into some of the meat that comes from that panel around privacy, around public goods, around negative externalities, all that fun stuff. So I think one of the most important things that we need, I think, comes through from that conversation is this idea of owning your own data. And I know I pressed you on it and what that means, but I think that is quite a clear stamp. It's a very, very clear message and a narrative to push people. I know that's your message. So it's probably good that I keep reinforcing it, even without knowing I'm doing it. But rather than me do any further introductions or build up, what I'm going to do is hand over to you to do a short demonstration, a short pitch on what you're doing and why, and then we'll dig into the Q&A after a few minutes. How's that sound?
That sounds good. First challenge is to make all the technology work seamlessly. How hard can that be? Hopefully, are you seeing my data unlocked screen? All good?
All good.
Excellent. Okay, so I mean, we talked about, I think one of the key themes was around consumer grade technology, and that's really where I'm coming from. So why TapMyData and why now? Why am I doing this? Well, technology has driven a data explosion, and actually most of this has been created since GDPR in the last 2 years. And the problem is that we've all lost control, and companies are now, the public sector's lakes of personal data are turning toxic, with rising fines and GDPR rights being weaponized. And businesses are using methods and tools which don't scale and aren't secure. This means that trust, as we were talking about, has been badly damaged, but I'm an optimist and I believe it is renewable. So at TapMyData, we've built a dedicated channel for data dialogue, which consists of an app for people to exercise their rights, a secure wallet, and a web portal for businesses to manage requests and share data. We designed this around the challenge of access requests, expanded it to other data rights, and now to portable ID. For consumers, our app offers them tools to discover, store, and manage their data. And we use our own light touch ID verification technology and a data wallet to keep people's info on their phone, correct it, and share it with partners. And we also have the means to monetize this with our own crypto token. Companies struggle to exchange personal info and credentials in any context, which breaks the customer experience. We offer a channel for communication to flow around a need to share data. And because TapMyData built the channel to privacy by design standards, we have no visibility of this information shared. Our technology is end-to-end encrypted, and we've got a full API and working integrations with popular third-party CRM platforms like HubSpot. So where have we got to? Well, we now have the largest source of data on access requests anywhere in the world, and around 500 companies are registered and using the platform in some way. Users are creating reviews, ratings, and information on companies' levels of data service, and we're now using location check-in as an on-ramp for users and companies to our core services. We operate a SaaS model where companies purchase subscriptions for premium functionality. ID verification services can be rolled in with data rights, or they can be purchased on a standalone basis, while smaller companies can buy packs of credits for which our token is the mechanism. The ID verification and solutions markets are growing strongly, especially in Europe, where SMEs are underserviced. We already have interest in our ID technology as an alternative to existing KYC products. And the opportunity for PrivTech is much larger. And we just heard that Europe just announced the creation of a market for consumer data in which they see rights technologies as a key tool. So what's coming up? Well, COVID has moved a whole section of the population and smaller businesses online for the first time. So building out multi-purpose ID, our web channel and brand to meet this opportunity is a key use for our next fundraising. In terms of a team covering PrivTech, blockchain and data commerce, our people are experienced in founding, growing and exiting businesses across the tech spectrum. And our specialists bring together the skills to take these new ideas from conception through MVP to delivery and communicate that on an agile basis. So what we're doing is moving this conversation on from compliance to connection. So, Lawrence, let's talk data.
Thank you for that, Gilbert. That was excellent. And particularly like toxic lakes.
Yes,
I'm thinking
I like that.
evil warehouses.
It sounds like sounds like a good heavy metal band, doesn't it?
But there's some realism in there, because I think that's right. These data lakes are not pristine, and actually, you're right to say that they've been spoiled to some extent. So
indeed,
excellent. Well, look, I want to dig into that, and the most important thing, to think about when people are building products in PrivTech, privacy is it obviously matters to you. It's not the latest fad, and you're building something to make quick money. I mean, this is something that obviously is meaningful and important to you. Why? Why privacy? Why this?
I think, I, like quite a lot of other people, got the privacy bug as a sort of a byproduct of my day job. So I was running a London digital agency, and we, in a small part way, were part of this big, the Lumascape, the ad tech ecosystem, which again, since GDPR, has exploded even more with more and more intermediaries. And with the advent of the cookie laws, it was a kind of a stimulus for me and lots of other people to start to think a bit more closely about what we were doing with data, and our own exposure to risk, and consumers' exposure to risk. So this led to us, we disappeared down that rabbit hole, and that very quickly it came from a thing that we were told by some of our biggest clients to stay away from this. This is just a problem, to a real opportunity. And Peter has mentioned that we've seen the rise of reg tech and PrivTech since then. And for us, this turned into an opportunity to basically pivot the agency into software as a service product to audit sites and generated, I've already mentioned, like the hated cookie compliance banners. And after I sold this business to OneTrust, I knew that what I wanted to spend, the remainder of my career on would be around helping people take back control of their data. But this is it's a big task, and it's going to be done one piece at a time. And I knew that this was going to have to be with a combination of consumer grade tech and these rights GDPR gave them. Rights are both a tool, and if not respected, they become a weapon. There's that pivot going on there.
I mean, I love asking why 3 times, but in particular, the rest of your career to giving people access or give you their data back. What do you think either is being lost today because they don't have the data, or what will be enabled when people, you win? You're Bill Gates. You've put a PC on the desk of everybody. You've fulfilled your mission. You've gave everybody back their data. What world do we live in? What does the world look like? How is it different?
One where you don't, and I've got a lot of time for Bill Gates. One where you don't have a zero-sum game, where you don't have a winner. When you think about the origins of the web with Tim Berners-Lee, that people's data and people's identity resided, with them or on their hard drives. What we've moved to now, as we talked about earlier, is a situation where all of our digital identities reside in the silos of a couple of huge organizations. So actually, I think the future where we win is where individuals have real agency over their data, and it is decentralized in the same way. And that's a big shift, but it's something that we already navigate pretty elegantly in our offline lives. If you think about the dance that we all do with exchanging data and monetizing data. We're able to bring that context and that nuance which is lacking. And I think it's evident from watching things like the Social Dilemma that we're in serious this model, this winner takes all model, is in serious danger of blowing up its own engine. So I think even the architects of that, from McNamee through to Googlers, realize that there needs to be a shift, and that's going to involve government actors. It's going to involve regulators, yes, but will they look the same as they do now? Probably not. And it is going to need to have mass adoption. You're going to need technology which is intuitive and is as good as the tools we currently use to have marketing voodoo dolls made of us and to manufacture interest, because we're starting to see the fallout from that, whether it's in terms of data breaches or much more in terms of mental health. So it sounds utopian, but I think there's a need and a chance for a reset, and it's going to be GDPR rights are going to be a key tool in this.
In policy circles, something like this will be described as a wicked problem. It's a problem for which it's not clear. It's not clear what caused the problem, and well, clear in the sense of, you could say, it was the server client architecture, and this was inevitable. It was software, and it was inevitable. It was the design of the internet, because there was no identity associated to it. There's lots of potential causes, and now we're path dependency, and we are where we are. But it's so big and so challenging that I wonder, is it a narrative mistake to put identity and data together? As in, we need to solve both identity and we need to give people data rights. Is it too much to chew off? How do you think about separating the actual different elements that we need to address, whether it be identity, data, or any that I've missed?
That's a really excellent question. I think it's tempting to try and build some kind of panopticon that you can do everything. And I think that taking a single approach to ID and proving that, I am who I say I am when I exercise my rights, and treating that in the same way as a KYC process is not appropriate. If you think about a lot of these things that we do, say offline, whether it's a charity onboarding a new volunteer, or more recently, businesses reopening and checking in people for COVID contact tracing purposes, but taking them through a full KYC process and an ID verification process like that is overkill. And actually, to a certain extent, privacy activists would argue that that's designed in. If you are having to go through an exhaustive ID process to merely start a conversation about where did you get my data, is going to there's a survey done in Germany a couple of years ago, which said that deterred 80% of people. That's 80% of people, right, who have been put up. There's a difference. If you're asked to show your papers at the door, it stops a lot of people asking the question. So I think there's a space for whether it's at Tap, we built our own ID verification, so light touch ID verification solution, because we needed one that was appropriate for this new task, which was, I need to make sure that that I'm Gilbert Hill, but there's no reason, Lawrence, for you to have scans of my utility bills and my passport to be able to start that dialogue, because actually that's a risk to both parties. And again, what we're seeing is, metaphorically, in some cases physically, that companies having to do this ID role on top of their other processes are accumulating large piles of paper and electronic risk around this, which benefits no one. So I think there's a way that the two can work together.
That's yeah, okay, that makes sense, and I think helping end users understand exactly which part is an identity solution, or helping them manage that in just a more effective way. I mean, that's a whole problem to solve on its own, and I know NetToken are potentially trying to address that as that relates to authentication. Then you've got this whole area of my data now and me knowing where it is, and then to ask Stuart's question, I think it's related to the fact that you know, who owns the data isn't always clear, and data is relational. You know, does it belong to me? Does it belong to my family? Does it belong to the employer, my school? So you have all of these sort of layers. So how do you think about users monetizing their own data? How do you think about how rights and royalties work when all this data is interrelated? It must be it's a challenging question.
Yeah, that's a humdinger, and there's lots of people, you know, working on that. I think part of it is about creating. At the moment, if you think about it, you know, the monetization of data is kind of the black box on these really large platforms. So advertisers are only buying the change in behavior that the owners of that data, well, they should be the custodians, but they're acting like the owners of that data, can affect by using those data points. So I think there needs to be, you know, so a big step towards a functioning market for data is firstly, it's around agreeing a commonly understood taxonomy for what are the data points, what is in the public sector, what is highly personal to me, and then and I think that's where you know, government can play a big role, and also academia. How you then move that into a commercial context, I think, you know, the challenge that with a lot of the frameworks, there's something, I mean, like, you know, if you take it like ethical, you know, a lot of companies rightly are prioritizing data ethics as a KPI for their business. There's something like 70 ethical frameworks have popped up in the last sort of 5 years. Many of them from an academic background. I think the challenge is, how do you move that into a situation where people can understand it, and new entrants, companies, can come in and facilitate those data points? There's a temptation for platforms to create something and then fail to meet the technical challenge, which is to make it accessible to people. And then they sort of sit back and go, we've created the framework, now they will come. What we've seen over the past, you know, this is not new, over the past like 10 plus years, they haven't, which is why we need to start people saying, you know, start a dialogue around data, so people can say, actually, I'm fine with my location data, or I'm fine with my, you know, with my device data. I'm not fine with the fact that I, you know, my religious data, or data pertaining to other people. So it's created at the moment. It's a very blunt object. You go, you receive a service, you know, you are the product, and you're sort of cracked over the head for all of your data. I think whatever moves we can make to more granularity and more context around that are only going to be a step in the right direction.
And so how does that, you have quite a wide range of customers, from what I could see, a wide range of industries and markets as well. So is there a commonality of the problem that you're solving for them? Is it data liability? What is the pitch that works for these customers?
I think they're all trying to move beyond compliance. For different reasons. I think in the early days post GDPR, there was a feeling that it was kind of like, you know, mission accomplished, and there were even comparisons with Y2K. And what clients and companies are seeing now is that the Pandora's box opened by GDPR won't go away, and those challenges are more complex than ever. And that the reason someone gets in touch and asks about their data isn't necessarily it's not because they are a potential bad actor. It's not because they are a disgruntled ex-employee or an investigative hack. That actually starting a dialogue with them is a way to short circuit this very ponderous compliance focused process, because that's not working for anyone. If you are getting, you know, the volume of subject access requests, just as one example, or with CCPA, deletion requests have exploded. It's only going northwards. If to each of those requests you take a paralegal sort of approach, and it costs you something like $1,400 per request. So it's not tenable. And, you know, also the people working within organizations, you know, say the data protection officer, they know that for the risk to that organization around data breaches and this blow up to be limited, they need a seat at the top table. to do that, they need to link and repatriate these activities back to the parts of the businesses that own them. So the people in the contact centers should be able to answer your initial question, which is, how do you get my data? And do that in a way that they're trained to do, and they can do elegantly, and they have the right data points and the right systems. Hence, one of the first things we looked at was integration with CRM, because this shouldn't be a special project. And I think companies are struggling to move it out of that. Everyone's had training and has a dashboard in place. How do we truly operationalize this so that I get the same experience? Because the next step is then I can start to share data. I'm able to share my surplus mobile phone data with my teenage daughter because she's always maxing it out on TikTok or whatever. Whereas we should be able to do that. That's a model for how we can start to do that. And again, smart brands are seeing that that's a way that they can start to turn this away from a cost center to something that generates loyalty, value, etc. And also down the line, it also generates revenue.
And how do you answer the question? And this is more related to Jumbo, I'm sure what they're working on, and then some critiques around that specific app, which is I bought into the idea that all of these actors have my data and it's disparate. But now I'm putting it in one place. Maybe I trust you because you've encrypted data at rest and maybe in transit, and maybe you're coming up with new ways to encrypt data in computation. But it becomes, in my mind, a honeypot, and I have to trust you. Then, how do you have that conversation? How do you find the clients address that?
Yeah, that's a really good point. But again, you're trading one owner for a new one. I mean, the one of the biggest challenges that we faced was about applying privacy by design. And privacy by design has been around for a while. And again, it's something that a lot of organizations believe in. I was going to say pay lip service to, but actually they believe in. But it's actually really difficult to affect. So in the case of Tap, what we've done is we had to make the decision that we don't want your data and we want it to be put out of anyone's way, so that when you build a connection with an organization and you start having a data dialogue, there is an encrypted two-way channel which we have no access to. And the other thing, which is the other key element, is that we didn't also, the problem with all of this GDPR compliance is that everyone is marking their own homework. So everyone is saying, we keep your data safe and we comply with GDPR, even though no one knows what that really means. But actually using the blockchain as the tally, the public statement of record for this, for the fact that you shared your data and it went from, that without the details of that data being stored on the blockchain, is for me one of the first killer uses for the blockchain, because up until then it was, a lot of them were quite esoteric and they required huge amounts of investment by the likes of IBM to kind of socialize them. This is a killer use for blockchain. So I think by the more that you can communicate, we talked about taxonomies, but also a way to build tech, which is away from let's get all the data, work out how to keep it more or less secure, and then work out how to monetize it. It's like we start with nothing. We start talking, then I'll take the elements of your data that I need, and that will be to fulfill this function. But actually, your data remains a black box. That I think that the tools exist, but it's a question of education with all of this stuff.
Yeah, and speaking of education, I guess, and hopefully you won't mind me calling you a greybeard. You literally do have a greybeard.
I do.
So you've been in this space broadly for a long time, and probably have learned a tremendous amount. Is there anything, any sort of learning or something that's been counterintuitive in your experience that a new founder in this space, or somebody that wants to address these problems but are relatively new to the space, what sort of advice would you give them? What sort of learnings would you give them to help speed up that process?
The temptation is to go, privacy, blockchain, etc. It's a new club and could go up the, go up the learning curve, and that's really important. The danger with that is that you end up in an echo chamber where you're only talking with people who share your worldview. I find the advice I'd give is that wherever possible, I used to sit on the bus and listen to people talk about this kind of stuff, but and that was a watershed moment with GDPR. GDPR meant that people on the bus were talking about privacy in a way they'd never done before. Or I've been listening to Planet Rock Radio, and there'd be an ad from the regulator around personal data. And I think now, as COVID is another touch point for that. We're all being asked to share more and more data and put more and more trust in the hands of public sector bodies and also commercial bodies. That is to listen to what real world people have to say about data, and they are not saying that they don't care, or if they are, it's from a point of view that of exhaustion or resignation. But actually, when you dig deeper, they do care very deeply, and it's very. I find that that's what keeps me going when you start to look at the existing huge infrastructure around EdTech. Where we are at the moment, I think, if you think about the Star Wars film, when the giant Star Destroyer gets hit and it starts to crack, I think we're at that point now where it's just on the tipping point. And I think that's very exciting. And, if you can combine that with the excitement that you got with people around really, the first, consumer applications for like crypto trading and things like that, if you bring in the personal interest incentive as well, then you've got dynamite.
That's a good assessment, I guess, of the state of the space. And the key takeaway for me from what you've said, and I guess this is broader to startup world in general, which is speak to customers, but don't just speak to your friends or your small circle. Speak to people on the bus. But what you're getting at there is you're going to need to have more than 100 customers, or probably 1,000 customers. You're going to need to get out of that, and what matters to them. And I think Brave's a good example, and one of our investments, which is, if you look at how Brave originally pitched itself, privacy is the secondary consequence. Actually, what they're focusing on is fast, right? And there are incentives around it, but actually saying that it's very, very fast, because it realized people care about things being fast and getting time back, and privacy is a byproduct. And I think a lot of what you've described and what TapMyData seems to do is it's convenience and simplicity. It's giving people back that aspect, and then privacy comes as a byproduct.
Absolutely. It's about, I think, fast works, also control works. And I think, having a situation where people go, Tap is where I keep my data, and that they know that both individuals and businesses know that it's around meeting a task, which could be to, show that you are who you are to get a flat or to become a volunteer, that, the rights and the privacy by design are baked in, rather than that being the key element, because people have got busy lives. Right. They want to do stuff.
People have got busy lives. That is, considering the next panel is retail adoption in DeFi. I think people are busy to get onto the next thing, which is the modern world. But that was wonderful, and really appreciate your insights there, Gilbert. So with that, I'd like to say thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.
And if you could drop any notes for the audience in the messages, so they could find out where to find you and what to do. And I would just like to say, as a final thing for all of those listening, I'm sure you'll hear this throughout the day, but Gilbert is part of the Outlier Ventures Basecamp program, and applications are open for the next cohort. So please do check out that and click through and look at the links. And if you've got any questions, do ask the team. That'll be available on the platform throughout the rest of the day. So thank you very much, Gilbert. Been a pleasure.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot. Take care.